I stand before you today. There is so much hope among us, and we come together to imagine a feminist world. I have come here from the island of Lanka, where I live on the east coast. The land I call home was devastated by war for most of my lifetime. I work with rural agricultural women's groups, fishing women's groups, women living with war-related disabilities, families of those who face enforced disappearance, domestic workers, and informal sector workers. You can put the first slide. I also work with a powerful feminist union, the Ceylon Workers' Red Flag Union, which is fighting against the mounting challenges of women workers' rights in the tea and rubber plantation sectors. Welcome to all the unions from Sri Lanka today. Next slide, please. Today, as we gather here, developing countries are facing the worst debt crisis in history, with almost half their budgets being spent on paying back their creditors. The report by the campaign group Debt Relief International says that more than 100 countries are struggling to service their debts, resulting in them cutting back on investment in health, education, social protection, and climate change measures. Debt service is absorbing 41.5% of budget revenues on an average across 144 developing countries. Out of the 32 worst affected countries with the heaviest debt service burden compared to revenue, 10 countries are in Asia, and my country is one of them. So globally, who holds this debt? Next slide, please. Multilaterals, including the World Bank, hold 46% of the debt of countries who were eligible for the debt service suspension initiative of the World Bank. Sri Lanka is not even on this list. Commercial creditors hold 19.5%, with bondholders holding 13%. Next slide. In Sri Lanka too, most of the debt is to international financial institutions and international sovereign bonds, ISBs. Next slide, please. In this context, what is corporate capture? I think Azra explained that to us. And this graphic describes it really well. So I would just say that corporate capture and debt go hand in hand. In connecting false solutions and corporate capture, today I want to place the culpability of the IMF front and center. And in terms of crisis of resources, I will look at two resources. One, of course, is the land and seas, and secondly and most importantly, women's labor. My country is facing a severe economic crisis, and like many other countries in situations of debt, has signed its 17th agreement with the IMF, obtaining a loan of $3 billion over a period of 48 months, and rapidly implementing severe austerity measures as part of the conditionalities of this loan. Already this process of false solutions is on the way in the island of Mannar in the north, where the Mannar wind power project has been awarded to the Indian multinational conglomerate Adani Green Energy Private Limited. The Bishop of Mannar, where primarily Catholic fishing communities reside, along with environmentalists, have filed a fundamental rights petition in the Supreme Court. Next slide, please. The wind power project will not only impact on local livelihoods and land rights, but also destroy fishing, the seas, as well as seasonal migratory birds and the environment of Mannar. Next slide, please. Secondly, in terms of false solutions and crisis of resources, using the debt crisis as a pretext, there is a rapid informalization and casualization of the workforce. The Sri Lankan Parliament, in its wisdom, has written into law IMF conditionalities and passed the Economic Transformation Bill in July this year. This law includes modernizing agriculture along with 100% foreign-owned investments and power to the minister to declare areas as investment zones. The new law also says that female labor force participation will reach not less than 40% by 2030. Along with this law, another law in the making, the Unified Employment Law, facilitates part-time work, compressed weeks, more simplified and efficient process of termination, and relaxes labor provisions in existing law. By passing numerous legislations that have enshrined IMF dictates, the government has curtailed the rights of Sri Lankans to decide their own economic futures. In this context, my union is fighting for higher wages and labor rights of tea and rubber plantation sector workers, who are primarily women. 3 international judges who presided at a workers' tribunal held by the Ceylon Workers' Red Flag Union strongly stated that the current state of affairs is one of systemic discrimination and exploitation and reduces women workers to conditions of bonded labor. Next slide, please. Meanwhile, under the guise of domestic debt restructuring, the retirement pensions of the working class have been reduced, including plantation sector workers, garment sector workers, who bring significant remittances to the country. The collusion of elite class interests with international lenders has never been so explicitly visible than under the current government in Sri Lanka. Simultaneously, the Unified Employment Law also has provisions to respond to sexual harassment at the workplace and giving legal rights to domestic workers. This places some dilemmas for our feminist activism. On the one hand, the state, following IMF recommendations, is rapidly rolling back rights. And on the other hand, seemingly addressing long fought for rights such as legal protection for domestic workers and at least recognizing sexual harassment at the workplace. The Sri Lankan government is also establishing a national commission for women through a women empowerment bill, another long fought for demand of the feminist movement. Therefore, I like to place the following questions to this forum. In this terrain, where long-standing feminist and labor movement demands have been appropriated by the IMF and government in the guise of debt restructuring, how do we position ourselves? Can new gender architecture, such as the National Commission on Women, expose the hypocrisy of policymakers, where those who contribute the most to the economy, in our case, women plantation workers, women garments workers, and migrant workers, are being treated worst as workers and as citizens by the state and society? How do we build strong movements towards debt justice, wealth tax, and other measures that are the only way to work towards effective equality within each society, nation, and world? How do we evolve discourses and feminist movements that imagine an economy that is beyond mere productivity, which values women only as growth contributors, to an economy? Can we sit back and congratulate ourselves that finally sexual harassment in the workplace is being recognized, when at the same time wages have not been increased, and there is rapid rolling back of labor rights, and there is trade union busting? How do we make care work an integral part of any economic analysis, in everything from analyzing big data to grassroots level mobilization? How do we affirm that which has been proven right over and over again, that free and public health care, education, and universal social safety nets are imperative in the future of societies, and austerity will only perpetuate the endless cycle of crisis. There are many people living with war-related disabilities in my town, like many others in the north and east of Sri Lanka. Women living with disabilities face multiple intersectional discriminations. These are women who have protected their children in the war, survived the war, and face everyday marginalization and discrimination in their communities and by the state. We have been organizing for several years in the post-war context to continuously demand for respect and rights for women living with disabilities. The women who have formed the Vannam Women Living with Disabilities group in Batticaloa are now facing the terrible reality of being unable to access healthcare, work, and being cut off the social welfare schemes due to austerity measures rolled out by the state, IMF, and World Bank. So what do? Next slide, please. They demand their rights through song. They write beautiful songs of anger, grief, love, the economic crisis, the fish, the lagoons, the rice fields, and the local gods. They write about struggling as women, as persons with disabilities. The songs are created collectively and nourishes all of us, as well as being a damning critique of neoliberal economic policies, war and militarism, debt crisis, the IMF World Bank pushed austerity measures and its impact on ordinary rural war-affected communities trying to survive. I share with you one of these songs. It's a song of grief in these troubling times, but it's also a call for solidarity and action. The translation is on the slide.
Anniye